Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of An American in Thailand, airing every Friday. We broadcast this program to you from Ratchamakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. I will be bringing this program to you in two parts. For the first part, I will introduce a certain topic about being an American here, living in Thailand. Could be about food, or travel, culture, anything like that. We'll then take a break. And in the second part of the program, we'll get into some examples and some more specifics. Then we will have the news and the latest updates from the university as usual. Welcome everyone, my name is Gary Gray and I am your host for the American in Thailand program. I am an American English teacher here in Bangkok, Thailand. I have been teaching here at Ratchamakan, University of Technology, Peranakan, for about 8 years. I'll be going into my 9th year soon. In about a month, we start our new semester as of the time of this recording. I will be going into my 9th year, but I have been here for about 8 years. And so that gives me a pretty good perspective on Thailand. I'm still learning new things every day, so I don't know everything about Thailand. So I may make some mistakes here in our program as I compare Thailand to America. And even in America, such a big country, even though I lived my whole life there, grew up there until I moved here, I don't necessarily know everything about America. In fact, we're going to talk about one of the issues today where it's different in different parts of America. And I do know enough to know that fact, but I am not very well experienced in where it's different from where I grew up. So, I don't necessarily know everything here that we're going to talk about, so I might get a few things wrong about Thailand especially, but I try my best to get it right. I have been here long enough now that I have a pretty good idea about Thailand, the culture, the food, things like that. All right, so what we're going to talk about this week is we're going to talk about the differences in our educational systems between Thailand and America. So in the first part of our program, what I'm going to look at is kind of what those differences are. And then in the second part of our program, we're going to get into a little more detail about whether or not those are good or bad things. And I will tell you that some of the things I'm going to say, I will say that America's system is probably better. And some of the other things I'm going to say that Thailand's system is probably better. And it's okay if you disagree with me. These are my opinions just from my own personal experience. I was never like a full-time teacher back in America, but I did teach a few classes. I have taught a little bit, and of course, I went to school in America, so I'm familiar with the educational system there. And now, here in Thailand, I have taught at university for 8 years. I've done a little bit of teaching elsewhere, not too much, but I've done a little bit at the high school level. We also have at our university some high school students that take part in a certain program at our university. So I've taught other high school students here. I've done some tutoring as well, so I've done a little bit of other work with other students of different ages. So I think I have a pretty good perspective on the differences, and I've formed some opinions about what's better, what's not better. And again, you can disagree with me if you want. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just offering my opinion, my view. And as you will see, it's not going to be all like, oh, America's better. No, there are some things that I do think Thailand is better with. In fact, one of them is why I'm teaching here. One of the reasons why I teach here. Because if America's education system was so much better, why am I not teaching there? I will explain that to you. We'll get to that when we get to the details in the second half of our program. For this first half, we're just going to kind of briefly go through some of the different elements, what's different, and I'll explain, for those of you that may not understand, because you may not understand the American system, I'll explain what the differences are. I'm not going to really say, oh, this one's better, that one's better, or this is why, and we'll get to that in the second part. All right, so there are really a lot of differences, but there are actually quite a few similarities as well. I can tell you a similarity right off the top. Right off the top. I've done a little bit of teaching here at high school level. Done a lot of teaching here at university level. The way we structure the school day is very similar. At high school level here, Matayam, at my Matayam level here in Thailand, at least the school I taught at, maybe they're not all the same. The school I taught at briefly, I was only there for a few months, but I taught there briefly. The school I taught at, you had each subject every day, or at least multiple times a week. Sometimes they'd have like a day off or 2 days off where they didn't have the class, but you'd have that subject multiple times a week for a short class period. 45 minutes, or if it was like a double class, it would be 90 minutes. 45 to 90 minutes. At university, you have the classes less frequently, usually only one time per week. Sometimes you might have a really important course, which is 2 times per week. But usually the subject is 1 time per week, but it's a longer class. It's like 3 hours long. And that is the same structure here. And by the way, I believe I said in college in America. When I say college and I'm talking about America, I mean the same thing as university. I know here in Thailand, that has 2 different meanings. College and university are not the same. College is a lower level, university is higher. Most countries are like that. America is kind of unique that we don't have a difference there. We don't really consider there to be a difference. We do have that same kind of lower level where it's more for trades or like more hands-on type of studies where maybe you only need 2 years or something like that. And we would call those like community colleges or technical colleges, things like that. But just college for an American is the same thing as a university. So our like daily structure of classes is quite the same between America and Thailand. We do it one way at the high school, at the Matayam level. We do it one way. And then once you get to college, you have courses less often, but longer length. And it's because when people mature more, they have a longer attention span. I'm not so sure that's true anymore because with so much internet stuff and life being so fast-paced, people seem to have shorter attention spans, so I'm not sure that's really true anymore. It's really hard for me to teach for 3 straight hours with my 3-hour classes that we have at university without my students going crazy. We either have to trim a little bit off the beginning and the end, or we have to take a little bit of a break in the middle, something like that. And in fact, when we have our high school students come in to the university, their classes are not 3-hour-long classes. Their classes are usually 2-hour-long classes. So we do shorten it for the high school students. So that is the same between America and Thailand. But I'm trying to focus on what the differences are here today. But I mentioned that at first because I don't want you to think that it's completely, wildly, crazy different. No, we do have a lot of similarities. So let's talk about some of the differences. The structure of our school grades is different. Here in Thailand, we have Pratham and Matayam for everything that comes before, like university. Pratham, Matayam. Even though I've been here a long time, I sometimes forget how that's broken up. I think Pratham goes through year 6, I think. And Madhyam starts at year 7. I think. Again, I'm not 100% sure. But that doesn't really matter too much to what the difference is. The big difference is really that it's split in 3 in America. We have what's called elementary school, which is kindergarten, which is the class you take before grade 1. So we have kindergarten through grade 6 is elementary school. That is what I believe you call pratham here. And then we have junior high, which is usually 7th and 8th grade. Now in America, we give individual school districts. It's like a regional, there's like regional control over the schools. We give school districts enough control over the school that they can change this structure if they want. So some school systems will put grade 6 into the junior high. So elementary school may be kindergarten through 5th grade. Junior high is 6, 7, 8. And then high school is 9th through 12th grade. But most of them, junior high is just 2 years. It's grade 7 and 8. Kindergarten through 6th is elementary. Junior high, also called secondary sometimes, although there's a problem with that because high school is also part of secondary because you call university tertiary, which means third. So junior high or middle school is another word for it. Junior high or middle school is the best name to call that. So junior high or middle school is usually 7th and 8th, and then high school is 9, 10, 11, 12. I can understand both of these, the way they're set up. Generally, I think the Thai structure is better. Again, we're going to get to why in the second half. We'll discuss more about that in the second half. But just to my point that I'm not going to just keep saying, oh, the American education system is better. No, not with everything. So we'll explain why that is in the second part of our discussion. Okay, the actual grading system is different. Now, I will tell you that I don't know for sure if every school in Thailand does this. But I have seen it at more than one school, so I think this is consistent. And that is with your letter grades, A, B, C, D, F. So in Thailand, most school systems that I'm familiar with, at least, again, this is one of these areas where I could be wrong. I don't have a lot of experience with different school systems. I've been here at my university the whole time, but I have seen a few others. Most of them that I'm aware of, actually all of them that I'm aware of, but it may not be all of them because, again, I don't have a lot of experience with this. But most of them have a number score that corresponds to a higher letter grade than we have in America. What do I mean by that? Okay, so here in Thailand, anywhere from 80 to 100 is an A. 70 to 79, B. 60 to 69, C. 50 to 59, D. Below a 50, F. In America, it's like 10 points higher, or even more when you're talking about an F. In America, 90 to 100 is an A. 80 to 89 is a B. 70 to 79 is a C. 60 to 69 is not a D. No. 65 to 69 is a D. Anything below 65, so 64 or lower, is an F. So that makes it a little bit tighter a little bit harder to get those high letter grades in America. Which one's better? Again, we'll talk about that in the second part of the program. I think in this case, probably the American system might be a little better. Does make it harder. And there are reasons why I think Thailand does it the way they do, but I do think the American system might be a little bit better with that. Again, we'll talk about why. School funding is different. Many schools here in Thailand seem to be underfunded and under-equipped. Why that is? Some reasons behind that are probably actually very much understandable. And so it just is what it is. So again, we'll get to those details in the second part. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So it's a little difficult to say that America is necessarily better in that regard. And I will also say that not all American schools are funded well either. And it's because of the way they do the funding of the American school systems, which is also different than the way it's done in Thailand. So we will talk about that more as well. So America certainly has problems with this as well. It varies a lot more in America. And so it's more of a problem as far as across the board for more schools here in Thailand. So school funding is a bit of a problem here in Thailand. Again, not entirely Thailand's fault. We'll talk about that in the second part. So that one it's kind of hard to say who's better. I mean, it's not like anyone's doing anything wrong to create a problem with that in Thailand. No, that's just the way it is. Okay, and then school culture tends to be different. So here in Thailand, one of the things I noticed quite quickly is that there's more focus on like school activities, cultural activities, tradition, things like that. And the reason I notice that there's more of a focus on that is that I'll sometimes have my classes get canceled because there's some university event going on. Back in the U.S., when I went to university, I can't remember a single time in my 4 years at university where a class was canceled due to a university event. Never. They'll schedule the event after class hours in the late afternoon, evening time if they want to have an event. Or maybe they'll even schedule it on the weekends, which I know is inconvenient because some people don't live close by. Or they maybe have an apartment close by, but they usually go home to their family on the weekends or something like that. But that's what they do. We don't cancel classes for university events in America. I'm not going to say it never happens. I think it's probably... I went to university quite a long time ago. I'm getting fairly old, so it probably... Just the way the culture has changed, I think it probably happens occasionally now, even in America. But it's still not that often. It's much more common here. And that sounds like a bad thing. Not necessarily. It kind of can be, but it kind of can be a good thing. So again, we're going to talk about that in the second half. So I'll say once again, I don't want you to think I'm saying, oh, well, the Thai schools are bad. No. There's actually something about that that's very good. It is hard if you're a teacher and, oh, well, I had a lesson planned for that class, and now we're a lesson behind, so now we got to catch up. And so it can be frustrating as a teacher, but there are also some positive aspects to that. Okay, another difference in culture here is that here in Thailand, the teachers are encouraged not to fail the students. Oh, believe me, they don't tell us we can't. If a student never shows up for class, it fails everything all semester long. yes, they're going to get an F in class. But if we were to fail like half of our class, they're going to be mad at the teacher for failing half of the class. In America, if you have a really mean teacher and he or she decides they're going to fail half the class, oh well, they failed half the class. Too bad. I think I know why this cultural difference exists. Kind of goes back to school funding, actually. I kind of think that's why that exists. But it is a difference, yeah. So here in Thailand, we're encouraged not to fail the students. It's also a much more laid-back environment here in Thailand. In some ways, I think that's a good thing, especially because of the next point, which is that there's more respect for teachers here in Thailand. Okay, which those things almost seem like they would be opposite, right? If it's laid back, so maybe the students are having more fun, maybe they're chatting more in class. Well, that's not very respectful to the teacher. It's not exactly what I mean as far as it being more laid back. Again, we'll get more into a discussion of that in the second part. So I think these two things can go together, being more laid back and having more respect for the teachers. So I gave you 4 different areas in the first part: the structure of the school system, the actual grading system, school funding, and school culture. So let's talk a little bit more about the details of these. All right, so for the structure of the schools, I can kind of understand both ways. But overall, I would prefer the Thai structure, where it's pratham, matayam, rather than having the 3 different tiers. I will say I do understand why there are the 3 different tiers in America. You kind of go through a big transition physically, emotionally, everything like that around the grades of 7 or 8. Those are kind of the ages where you're transitioning into your teenage years, and so your body changes a lot, your attitudes change a lot, even about like love, like when you were a little kid in 3rd grade. If you were a boy, you don't want to be around the girls, things like that. At least when I grew up, that's the way it was. Whereas in high school, you're going to start dating, things like that. So I can understand kind of having 7th and 8th grade separate, which is what middle school or junior high is in America. Kind of those transition years. So kind of put those aside and give those a separate system. I get it. I understand it. But I still prefer pratham matayam style. Why? Well, for one thing, the junior high system, not everyone matures at the same rate. So even though you're trying to do that transition period there, some people, by the time they're out of 6th grade, are ready for high school. Some people in high school shouldn't be there when they're in 9th grade. They still belong in 6th or 7th grade because they're not very mature. So it doesn't work great. It certainly is not a bad idea having the junior high. I'm not sure it works great. It's not terrible. Like I said, it's not a bad idea. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the American system. But I don't think it works great. And given the ages that most students at 7th and 8th grade are, yeah, you are just starting the maturing process, but you are at least moving into it. So putting them into the Matayam system, as we do here, rather than having a junior high, is probably okay as well. And then there's just the practical. What I mean by practical is just how the whole thing functions. There's the practical setup for this. And that is that having the Pratam and Matayam system saves money. Most places in America, because the junior high or middle school is separate, it is physically separate. In other words, they have to build a whole new school for the junior high. You have a whole other set of teachers. The cafeteria for lunch, you have a whole other cafeteria. You have all of that extra stuff that you need to pay for. Now, of course, if you take those students and move them into the high school, into the Matayam, well, then the school building still has to be bigger. You're still going to need to have more teachers. So you're not going to save all of that money. But it's certainly a lot cheaper to have a bigger building than to have to build a whole new building. The land you're building on costs money. You got to build the whole building. You may need to still have the same number of teachers, depending on how busy their class schedules are. So there may not be any savings there. But the cafeteria, sure, they're cooking for more people. So maybe they need a couple more units for their ovens or whatever, or their stoves or whatever they're cooking in. But they don't need a whole complete new setup. So there's going to be some money saved there. Electricity, which can get very expensive with air conditioning, as you know, here in Thailand. There's going to be less space since the building is going to be smaller than the combined total of the two buildings, even though it's going to be bigger than just what you would have as a high school in America, since it's only 4 years. So you're going to put 6 years worth of students in the building. The building is going to be bigger, but it's still going to be smaller than the total size of the two separate buildings. And so it's going to be, so the electricity is also going to be cheaper. So just so many things are going to be cheaper. And so you save money with the structure of the schools here in Thailand. And as we're going to talk about a little bit later with the school funding, that's important. We need to try to save some money. So I prefer the structure of the system here in Thailand. Again, the 3-tier structure, elementary school, junior high, high school, in America isn't bad. I understand it. You want that transition 2 years while the kids are starting to mature into teenagers. I get it. I understand it. Not a terrible idea. I'm not against the American way of doing it. I think the Thai structure is better. Okay, so the grades. We talked about the grades, how there's like a 10-point shift from the American grading system versus the Thai grading system. This is one area where I would have to say that the American grading system is probably better. Why is that? Okay, first of all, it just makes more sense. We have a 10-point range for almost every grade, except for D in America, where it's only 65 to 69. But every other grade range has 10 points, right? 10-point range for everything. Why is there a 20-point range for A's in Thailand? So it just doesn't even make logical sense. 90 to 100 is an A. Okay? It's just logical. The second issue is, and I know this to be the case because I've heard educators in other parts of the world talk about this. The universities around the world know what other countries in the world do as far as their grading and things like that. They have to know, because if they're going to get someone from a high school, in this case a Matayam, into their university, as an international student that wants to come to their university, they need to know what the educational system is like in the country they're getting that person from, because there's a wide range. And Thailand is far from the worst. So what quality of student are you getting? And part of that is knowing what the educational system is like. So most of these universities are aware of this normal grading system that we have in Thailand. And so what that does is it makes it more difficult for Thai students who want to attend an international university. It's harder to get accepted. It's usually easy for international students to get accepted because a lot of these universities like having the diversity of international students. You get different perspectives, different ways of doing things, different ways of solving problems. So it kind of helps out the entire university, having these different people with different backgrounds there. So it's usually fairly easy for foreign students to get into universities abroad. It's not always the case. Depends on politics. Right now, in America, there's a lot of kind of anti-immigration stuff going on. It's probably a little bit harder now because of that. There's been a lot of pressure by the government to get rid of their diversity programs at universities, and so some of them are cutting back on that, which may make it a little harder for international students to come in. But generally, universities like to bring in international students. So they actually would prefer that. So it makes it easier. Makes it easier to get in. And yet you don't see a whole lot of Thai students attending international universities. Certainly see it. And in fact, when we're talking about people going for higher level degrees, it happens all the time. We have many of our teachers here at our university have gotten their PhDs at universities overseas. My manager here, who was also a teacher, she got her PhD in America. So I'm not saying it's impossible to go overseas, but it does make it more difficult to go to an international university if you would like to. And the international universities, at least in certain countries, tend to be ranked a little bit higher than here in Thailand. Again, Thailand is far from the worst. There are much worse countries as far as education than Thailand. But obviously wealthy countries are going to have probably better universities just because they have more money, more funding. So they have more updated equipment and things like that. So America, Great Britain, Japan, even China to some degree, although maybe a little bit less so there. But sure, those countries are probably all going to have better universities. So maybe as a student here, if you're looking to get a better higher education, you may want to go to an international university. It's harder to do. It's harder to do coming from Thailand. Thailand also happens to have some of the lowest IELTS, so some of the lowest English proficiency. Let's put it that way, because it's not IELTS in every country that you have to take. Some of the lowest English proficiency. I'm not really sure why, given all the tourism here. Just an interesting statistic that I've seen is that throughout Asia, Thailand is one of the lower ranked countries in terms of English proficiency. I mean, some of it makes sense because some places like Malaysia or Myanmar used to be British colonies. The Philippines used to be a protectorate. In Japan, they do a lot of business with America, so you have to learn a little bit more English there. So some of the countries, that makes sense. But some of the other countries, it's kind of surprising where Thailand is below. So that makes it harder as well. But part of it isn't just English proficiency. Part of it is the grading system. The other countries know that Thailand is doing this grading system. And so they require higher grades in order to get into their university. So it makes it a little bit harder. So I kind of wish that we would have the American grading system. It is tough to do because, as we mentioned in the first part, they do not like to fail students. That's more related to school culture, but it's also related to school funding. So we'll talk about the school funding now. But yeah, they don't like to fail students. And so if you move that bar up to 65 in order to pass, you're going to get more students failing. So it's going to be hard to change that here in Thailand. But for my preference, I do prefer the American style of grading. Okay, for school funding, it is generally lower here in Thailand. This is something I would say, though, that's not better or worse. Thailand is still a developing country. It's probably ahead of pace compared to most of our Southeast Asian friends here. Like, we have a more developed, wealthier economy than Laos or Cambodia or Myanmar and probably Vietnam, although Vietnam has moved up fairly quickly, but probably better than Vietnam as well. I've been to Vietnam several times. They have a lot of really poor areas. We certainly have some poor areas here in Thailand as well, but they're really big poor areas in Vietnam still. But Thailand still would be considered a developing country. We're certainly not third world like some of the really poor countries in the world are, but we're developing. That means we have less money. So, of course, school funding is going to be lower. Now, the things usually cost less here as well. Being a less wealthy country means people can't pay as much, which does help bring down prices because prices are kind of all about competition and what you can charge for something. So things are cheaper here. But they can only just get so cheap. I mean, you imagine that Apple selling an iPhone isn't going to sell the iPhone for $1,000 in America, which would be about 35,000 baht here, and then sell it for 5,000 baht here. No. They can't drop the price that much. No. So the price decrease from the cost of living decrease isn't the same decrease as the amount of money that the country has. So even though the cost of living, like how much it costs to pay for stuff here, is lower relative to the amount the country has, yeah, the country still doesn't really have as much money as some of the as a country like America has. So some of this isn't about being better or worse. With the case of school funding, it just is what it is. I mean, Thailand has what it has. So, but it can be a problem sometimes. We have some classrooms here at our university which have basically no equipment to teach with. No computer, no overhead projector, no whiteboard, nothing. How do you teach in those rooms? No blackboard. How do you teach in those rooms? It's very difficult. Very difficult. I've had to teach in some of those rooms. And just so any of my university folks who happen to watch this don't think I'm picking on our university, I am not. Our university actually ranks pretty well here in Thailand. I think that might actually surprise some people. People think of the good universities here in Thailand. They think of Chulalongkorn, Mahidol, Thammasat. Yes, those are like three of the top universities. Chulalongkorn in almost every rating is ranked number one. They're almost always ranked number one. But here at Ratchamakan University of Technology, Peranakan, I've seen many, many rankings, and the lowest we're ranked is 66th. That's the lowest. You may say, well, yeah, that's not very good. Yes, but again, that's the lowest. We're as high as in the 20s in some rankings, so that's quite good. So it's a pretty good school, yet we even still lack the funding sometimes. I should also point out that in the U.S., it's not always consistent either because of the way schools are funded by local tax dollars. If you live in a poor area, your people pay less taxes because they make less money. Your school gets less money. So there are some really underfunded schools in America as well. We do have programs where the federal government or state government comes in and tries to help, but it doesn't close that gap entirely. So we have some really poor schools in America as well. All right, and we'll close this out with cultural differences. So all these things we mentioned, these can go either way as far as the differences. One of the things that's definitely better here is the respect that students have for their teachers. It's one of the reasons I don't teach in America. I would never teach in America. Now, at university level, they're not too bad in America, but generally speaking, the students can be very disrespectful. Again, not so much at university level, but still, I would never be a teacher in America. So that's something that's definitely better culturally here in Thailand. Now, one of the other differences I mentioned is that in Thailand, they focus a lot more on activities, culture, tradition, like we actually get classes canceled because of university activities, something you'd never see in America. So that sounds like I'm saying that that's bad, right? Because, you're canceling classes. You're not able to teach. That certainly is a bad side to it, yes, but it's not entirely bad. And I'll tell you why. I think it helps the students learn about their cultures, but it also, because there's more activities, it also helps them socially. One thing I've seen here in Thailand is that fewer students are kind of socially isolated, outcast. We certainly have some. I've certainly seen some, but there are fewer of them. And in America, those are kind of the students that can tend to cause problems eventually. Sometimes bad problems because we have such a gun problem in America as well. So this idea of helping the students socially, which I think these activities do, I think is actually a good thing. So which school culture is better? I'm not sure. There are pluses and minuses both ways. I kind of prefer it here in Thailand, but I could understand some people not liking that there's a little less focus on the actual educational aspect. But I kind of prefer it here in Thailand. I think some of these social aspects are important in order to succeed. Okay, so overall, we've mentioned 4 different areas where there are differences. Which one is better? I'm going to say neither. There are pros and cons. If I had to pick one, maybe it would be the American system because of the grading we talked about, just because I think that creates less opportunity for the Thai students as far as internationally. And since I'm an English teacher, I'm kind of thinking internationally. A lot of our students want to work abroad, do things overseas. So I would lean towards saying the American system is a little bit better, but not by much. I think a lot of people might think of educational systems in America, UK, Germany, all those countries being so much better. They are better in some ways, yes. But I don't think the difference is that huge. In fact, I think a lot of it comes down to the school funding issue I mentioned, which isn't really better or worse. That just is what it is. Thailand is not as wealthy as some of those other countries, so that's what we have. That's what we have here. So again, I don't think one is better than the other. I think they're both pretty good. Okay. Thank you for joining us for today's An American in Thailand program. Please stay with us and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. And please remember to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.